Okay, take three. This is the Episcopals Respond to the Asylum Emergency in Chicago webinar. This is actually a regular meeting of the Province 5 Migration Ministry Network. That's kind of a special event that we have this time. We meet bi-monthly, and everybody in the province who's interested in immigrant justice and these types of issues is certainly welcome to be a member of the Migration Ministry Network. So if this is your first time, hopefully it won't be your last time. We'd love to have you as a regular member of our group. I don't think that I have to emphasize this or make too much of a statement about this, because I think we're all here because we're compassionate people and we're concerned about immigrant justice issues. But it is part of our faith commitment. And on the left of the screen now is the, I think, rather beautiful logo of Episcopal Migration Ministries. There's a picture of the Holy Family as refugees in Egypt. We all know that story. And on the right, we see quotes from the Old Testament: "Don't mistreat any foreigners." The New Testament: "Be sure to welcome strangers into your home." And of course, Jesus said, "Love your neighbor as yourself," which pretty much says it all. So we do have a sort of a commitment as Christians, as Episcopalians, to welcome the stranger. Your church also has a lot of policy positions about immigrant justice. There are over 50 General Convention resolutions that in one way or another ask for improvements in or stopping bad things that are happening in the immigration system, both in the United States and globally. And just this morning, there was a hearing of this year's General Convention, a committee evaluating the Migration with Dignity resolution, which was passed by Province 5 back in April, and looks like it's highly likely to be passed by the General Convention. So we'll have kind of a general statement in this Migration with Dignity resolution that aligns immigrant justice with human rights law and basic human rights. So it basically asserts in a very clear and concise way that the Episcopal Church believes that migrants have human rights and need to be treated with dignity. So that's kind of a good step, I think, that will be taken very soon by the General Convention. Right now, you might be aware there's a lot of drivers of increasing global migration. Lots of wars and conflicts around the world, climate change, environmental problems, authoritarian governments and ethno-nationalism, crime and cartel activity. Just extreme economic hardship motivates many people to leave their home countries and migrate and look for a better life. Persecution of minorities, LGBTQ people, and other types of ethnic minorities, having problems all over the world. So there's a lot of reasons that are keeping people moving, or getting people moving. And you can see that it's an increasing number of people. So these are figures from the United Nations, which say that over 100 million people are forcibly displaced worldwide. So they're sort of forced to migrate. They're not just deciding that they'd like to pick up and move to a different place, but they have a fear, a reason to migrate. Now, this might not be, I think the Amnesty International estimates this at more like 200 million. So there's just a lot of people moving around the world at this time. And really at any time, I think humans have been migrating ever since the human race existed. But you can see on this graph that there's a big kink around 2012 when all of a sudden the curve starts to go up, the line starts to go up, and we see a increasing prevalence of migration. We don't think there's reason to believe that this is going to turn around in the future, that suddenly people are going to stop migrating or go back to the previous lower level of migration. There seems to be just a lot of drivers in the way the world is organized right now that are keeping people on the move, and it's something that we have to adapt to and find better ways to manage. Our immigration system, certainly in this country at this point, isn't doing a very good job of managing a situation. This graph shows the total number of immigrants in the U.S. population. I apologize, this might be a little bit hard to understand because there are two lines on the graph. The purple one is the number of immigrants in the country, And the scale is over on the right, so you can see that it's up to about 45 to 50 million immigrants within the US population now of about, I think it's 330 million. And then at the bottom, the blue line, you can see that the percentage is up around 15%. And this is as of 2022. So both of these numbers are probably a little bit higher at this point. Out of that 45 or 50 million immigrants in the US population, about half of them already are citizens. So they've already passed the citizenship, gone through the citizenship process and have citizenship in the United States. And then, excuse me, and then there's a big group that are have green cards or have applied for green cards and in the process. They're in the process of normalizing their immigration status. So, the actual number of people who are not legal immigrants in the country at this point is probably about 10 or 15 million. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Chicago has been attracting immigrants for decades, for generations. And there's always a steady flow of immigrants into Chicago. But as of about 2 years ago, a little bit less than 2 years ago, the governor of Texas decided that he wanted to make a point by busing a lot of people to Chicago. And since then, over 40,000 people have been bused from Texas to Chicago. And they're also being bused to other so-called sanctuary cities as a way of making the point that, we might not like immigration so much if we were receiving quite as many immigrants as they are at the border. The government is really a government scale problem when you're dealing with that many people. And the state government of Illinois and the government of Chicago have tried their best to deal with the situation, which is at first was kind of overwhelming. But they've also had a lot of help from the faith community. This is a picture from a church. It doesn't happen to be an Episcopal church, but it's a picture from a church that was collecting food and clothing and other kinds of essentials to try to help the new migrants as they're arriving in great numbers in Chicago. These statistics are from the city of Chicago. So you can see that in that time period of a little less than 2 years, about 40,000 people, more than 40,000 people have arrived in Chicago. And if you divide that by the number of months, it's about 2,000 people a month. So it's a big number of people to try to absorb, even in a city as big as Chicago. As some months have been much higher than 2,000, others have been lower. You can see that there are more than 7,500 people still in city shelters, but fortunately we've gotten beyond the point where at one point there were thousands of people waiting at police stations, sleeping on the floor literally in police stations and also at the airports. So we've kind of gotten past that emergency, at least for now. Of course, there's some concern that with the Democratic convention coming up in Chicago this summer, that the governor of Texas might ramp up the busloads even further and try to create a bigger problem. So Episcopalians have been stepping up. We've had a diocesan sanctuary task force since 2019 in Chicago. And that task force, does what it can to try to help with the situation. We've set up an Asylum Seekers Emergency Fund, which I'll tell you more about in just a moment. 4 of our churches are providing temporary housing for migrants. And you'll be hearing from Father Jaime in a few moments about how his church has been responding. There are several other churches that received a United Thank Offering grant just recently to support bringing more churches online to remodel their facilities so that they can provide housing. There's a lot of churches that are collecting clothing, essentials, money, making donations, helping the churches that are housing immigrants. So there's a lot going on in terms of the Episcopal churches in Chicago, helping with the asylum emergency, but there's also opportunities for people in churches outside Chicago and other parts of Province 5. The emergency fund, I will post a link to the emergency fund while Jaime is talking. You'll have an opportunity to contribute to that if you like. And I'm really sorry that my voice is acting up so much, but let me turn it over at this point to Reverend Jaime Briseño, who's the rector of St. Michael and All Angels Church, and ask him to tell you about how his church is responding to the situation. Go ahead, Jaime.
Thank you, Jack. So about November last year, obviously, as you saw already, thanks to Jack, we've been dealing with this migrant crisis or issue for a while, and we, as a parish, I like to say that I like to keep our facilities occupied. And it just happened that our rectory was not occupied, and I knew of the large necessity for migrant housing. And back in November, I think, and even now, the conversation was always that the shelters were not being enough to provide enough space for the families that needed it. So I approached Reverend Sandra Castillo, which is the real champion here, and she's part of it. I think I saw her logging in. She's a real champion in our diocese for migrant issues, and she's part of the Sanctuary Task Force group. And I approached her into proposing that we use St. Michael as a housing for recent arrival migrants. The idea is quite simple. We just had a house and we can occupy it with families. Part of the issue for us at the beginning, or the part that was clear for me and the leadership of the church, is that the resources of San Michael are quite limited. We had for a long time, for about 20 years now, a little bit more, been provided families with childcare in a daycare facility, a daycare center that we run. Um, so we have a lot of experience there, and we have a lot of experience with single women, and that are mostly the ones we ended up serving at the daycare. And we have a lot of experience with migrants. Our community is 100% Hispanic. We are a 100% Hispanic community, and comprised of mostly as well of recent arrivals and people with mixed migration status. So we have the culture and the language to provide this layer of extra support for the families that we might be serving. So we opened our house recently. I think it was the first family move in about thinking might have been about 4 weeks ago, and we provide that family with community group who is part of the Berwyn larger community. They're women, also happen to be women. That was not intentional. Who are part of the community of Berwyn, have been connected. Some of them have been connected with the church in different ways. Like in the past, they had used a baker, and some of them had no connection with the church whatsoever until now. And they have lended their time and support to create like a working group for the San Michael, we call the Angels group. And we started opening and refurbishing the house. There wasn't much that we needed to do into the house itself. Like anything in churches, people ended up putting things there that shouldn't be there. And the largest work was to get a big dumpster and get things out of the house that just needed to be thrown away. But the layer of support is supposed to be comprehensive for these families. We have the community, the house, the daycare center. We don't charge them, obviously, for daycare, nor can they qualify for, at this point, they cannot qualify for the support that the state gives for low-income families. So we provided a completely free daycare to the kids that come to us. We also provide mental health services. We have been providing this for the daycare and the community for 3 years now, but obviously it's extended also for the families in the house. And part of the reason, part of the profile that we set up for what we already had in our community was that these families had to be single women with kids. And the rationale was like, this is already what we've been doing for 20 years. So the only difference or the only ask we have for the community is now that we're housing them. That's the main thing. But we have plenty of experience of already serving single Latina women and their kids in the daycare in the church. We just extended this. We also provide for them case management through another organization called ICDI. And we're looking at providing migrant legal support for them as well. So we imagine this as a 4-layer of support for the families to come live with us. The case management, the immigration legal support, the community support through the women that are part of the cast of our group, the mental health services through sister family services, the daycare that provides the possibility for a work experience for the women who are there with us if they desire. They are required or asked for at least 15 hours of volunteer time in the daycare during a week, and that is intended to provide them with experience for work in the U.S. while they still working on their permits and all that, and the early childhood education for the kids in the daycare as well. And obviously the house that provides for them all of the utilities and um, pretty much everything that you can imagine that goes with a house plus food and internet and all that, all those things that they might need. Um, the strongest piece for us in this process is that we already had a community with where culture and language was not a problem, and where the community was involved, the larger community of CISA was involved in this, and where we could ensure that the layers of support for the families were strong and were lasting. This is not intended to be, at least our version of this is not intended to be temporary housing. We enter into an agreement with the families to between 1 and 2 years review, obviously with some rules and regulations that can be reviewed at any time, but we promise them 1 to 2 years of free housing with us. And I think is as I hope is clear, I really want to make sure that it's not just free housing. Free housing will be a lot easier than what we're trying to provide for this women and their kids, but it is in our full intention of the working group and the leadership of the church that we are providing with enough support for these families to have a positive impact in the community and in Berwyn as a whole. So that's what we're doing.
Thank you, Jaime. I do apologize for my coughing fit. I've been having a virus, and I thought I was over enough to pull this off, but I guess I wasn't quite as healthy as I thought I was. Sandra Castillo, or do I see you on the call? Can you hear me? Sandra, you're muted.
Yes, I said I was having a quick sandwich, so I turned off my video.
I just wanted to, because I can hardly talk this evening, unfortunately. I wanted to ask you to talk a little bit more about what the Sanctuary Task Force is up to and is contributing to the response to the emergency.
Yeah, actually, with our collaboration with Reverend Jaime and St. Michael and All Angels, because the accompaniment team includes several women who have been working with folks in the shelter. We now have come into contact with more people in the shelter. And probably this is the most current issue that we are dealing with, and that is the fact that there have been limits placed upon folks who are living in the shelter, and that most of them are being funded. They receive state benefits in Illinois. That includes the Medicaid, food stamps, and a stipend, a financial stipend. And the financial stipend is done through a link card, and the food stamps through another card, and I can't remember right now the acronym for that card, SNAP. And so the limits that are now being placed are that if anybody has been in the country for more than a year, their benefits will be suspended, except for women and if they have some minor children, and if they have delivered babies, the babies would be for 3 months after birth, unless they are able to prove that they have applied for asylum or for temporary protected status. Now, the issue is that our legal service organizations are overwhelmed. There's waiting lines at all the not-for-profit legal service organizations. And most of our folks do not have a lot of money to hire private lawyers. So a lot of people have not yet had the opportunity to apply for asylum or TPS. And so that is probably the most current issue that we're dealing with our new arrivals, as well as coming evictions from the shelters. And we do not have enough housing, and we don't have enough landlords who are willing to rent. The other issue is the fact that the government, the federal government, in this case, the way they set up the system is that our new arrivals are not eligible for work permits unless they file for asylum, wait 150 days, then they can apply for a work permit, which will take another 1 to 3 months to process. And TPS, temporary protected status, you can apply for TPS and a work permit at the same time. But again, there's way too many folks for our legal service organizations to help. What happens now is that there have been government funds used first for 6 months free rent, now for 3 months free rent. But because of the situation with the work permits, folks from the shelter are placed in these apartments, can't work because they don't have work permits. The 6 months have gone by, they stopped using 6 months, then they reduced it to 3 months. 3 months go by, and they don't have any way to pay their rent. So now we find that we're also helping folks with rental support until they can get a job. And oftentimes they have to work under the table, not because they don't want to work, not because they don't want the work permit, but because of the way the system is set up. So that's probably the most current issue right now, is trying to find housing for folks who are being forced to leave the shelter. And the conditions in the shelter are not that good. There are several shelters in the city and in the suburban areas, and they're very overcrowded. So that's in terms of the new arrivals. And in terms of that, we're also networking through the Sanctuary Working Group, because the only way we can do what we do is with coalitions and networks. So with the Sanctuary Working Group, which is a network of over 40 churches and nonprofits, we are able to find housing for folks. We are able to find, we're able to do some rental support. We're also active with ICER, the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights. And that's how we do our advocacy at the state level, because not too many states in this country provide benefits for undocumented people. And with the federal level, but of course with the situations in Washington, it's very difficult to get anything passed in Washington right now. We're much more effective working through ICER at the state level, the county level, the local level. And it's a great opportunity to work with all of these different organizations that represent all of the immigrant communities in the state of Illinois. And I particularly enjoy the fact that I get to work with a lot of young people through ICER. They're very involved and engaged in their communities, and they're very committed and very compassionate people. So that's how we do that. And we simply try to pick up as many connections as possible. The Uncaged Art that Jack is now leading up, where we are able to visit different churches, and Jack can explain a little bit more about Uncaged Art. And now we're working on another connection with a group from Mexico that wants to distribute a documentary that is called Las Abogadas, the lawyers, the female lawyers. And this is an organization in Mexico that is working to build a shelter for migrants who are stuck in Mexico, and they're raising $500,000. And so they're asking for our help here in the Chicago metro area to distribute it. And the folks in the Province 5 want to know more about it, you can email me. And the reason why the networking is so important, I'll give you an example. Last week, I got a call from a member of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese. And he said that he was working with families in Mexico to get them across the border. A family, I forget from what country, had an appointment with Customs and Border Patrol in Laredo. And they were approached by the cartel. And the cartel demanded the mom and the 4 children to each pay $1,000 to allow them to go to the Customs and Border Patrol for their appointment. They didn't have the money, of course, so the cartel forced them to go buy bus tickets to Monterrey, and they forced them to get on the bus, and they waited until the bus left, and they went to Monterrey. So they're stuck in Monterrey. So this gentleman from the Archdiocese said, is there any way, a mutual friend of ours said that you may have contacts. And so I thought about the folks we're working with on this documentary, Las Abogadas. So I put them in contact with these 2 women, and one of the women then contacted one of the abogadas. And it turned out that the lawyer had said to my contact here at the Archdiocese that this is very customary, that happens often in Mexico, and that unfortunately our Customs and Border Patrol will make no exceptions. If somebody misses an appointment, they have to request a new appointment. But the point that I'm making is that the networking allows us to have a broader reach and to access much more information and much more resources. So those are, and if Jack wants to talk about Uncaged Art, I would welcome to talk.
Thank you, Sandra. I don't think I'll attempt that, but maybe we could open it up to questions. Do people have questions that they would like to? You can either, use a little hand raising feature, or just unmute yourself and start asking. There is one question in the chat from Mark asking me to repeat about the group and give a little bit of history. The Migration Ministry Network of Province 5, as far as we know, Province 5 is the only province level migration ministry network that there is. So the other provinces don't have anything quite like it. And we are just a group of people who are interested in immigrant justice issues. And we meet every couple of months. Mostly we talk about what's going on in our particular community and try to help each other with ideas about how you can solve problems or support people or raise funds and things like that. And it's a good exchange of information, a good exchange of ideas among people who have this issue in common and are in one of the, I think there are 6 Province 5 states, so it's kind of across the Midwest. Episcopal Migration Ministries has a network, a similar network that's nationwide, but as far as we know, the Province 5 is the only network that has that. So I think if you're interested in these issues, it's a good way to learn from people who are already involved. You don't have to feel like you're not doing enough or not involved enough to really participate and contribute, because it's a good kind of a open forum. So we meet for about an hour every second month. And as I said earlier, everybody on the call who's interested and would like to is certainly, invited to participate, and we'd love to have you as a member of the network.
What?
Would anyone like to raise any questions for myself or Jaime or Sandra?
I have to think about it just a little about that. Okay.
I can add one more thing, I guess, since we have this space. One of the things that we have encountered as we interview and try to help people discern if living in the house with other families is a good fit for them is some of what Sandra, Reverend Sandra mentioned. And a lot of people are looking to us, to San Michael and the house that we are providing, because they're running out of benefits they're running out for those 3 months of rent that they had, and they don't have any other solution. And what ends up happening to us is that they tell us that they really don't want to live with other families. They'd rather be on their own. And what they really need is rental assistance. Our program, our church itself is not set up to provide rental assistance. I know that through Sandra, we had tapped into some resources from the Sanctuary Task Force, but it just pains me because when somebody tells me that, I'm like, well, definitely you're not a good fit for the house because you don't want to be there, but you definitely need the rental assistance, and that's just being part of the painful experience of providing this for a while.
Yes, I did post in the chat the link to the Asylum Seekers Emergency Fund. And that's an opportunity to, potentially help people who need rental support and other types of support. That emergency fund, which was set up by the Sanctuary Task Force, has already given some funding to Jaime's church and to other churches and individuals who, need some type of assistance that goes beyond what the government programs can provide, or is needed more quickly than the government red tape can make something happen. So if you'd like to personally make a contribution to that fund, it would be certainly helpful to all of the issues that we've been talking about tonight, that we've raised tonight. And there could also be opportunities to contribute directly to St. Michael and All Angels. You go to their website, that's in Berwyn, Illinois, and on their website you can find a link where you can donate directly to the programs that Jaime is setting up there. So that would be terrific. And it occurs to me that there might also be opportunities for people to work with groups at their churches in other parts of the province to directly link up with Jaime or one of the other priests at the churches in Chicago that are doing this type of work, and try to, your church could be kind of a partner or a supporter church for those churches. So if you think about it creatively, there's a lot of opportunities for people who may not be living in Chicago where the problem is really acute to, kind of help it and try to make a contribution in that way. Sandra, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, 2 points. I really have to commend Reverend Jaime, because this is the first time that in the Diocese of Chicago that is a Latino congregation stepping forward to house asylum seekers. And what we see in terms of the hesitance of congregations to house asylum seekers is many lack the funds in order to do the repairs that are necessary to bring the property up to code. That's the first thing. The second thing is the fact, as Jaime had said, that the congregation has made a commitment of between 12 to 24 months to house up to 4 families. And that takes a lot of resources, a lot of monetary resources and in-kind resources. So I give him a great, I commend him and St. Michael and All Angels for stepping forward to do this. And we're hoping that it's going to impress other congregations to see that it is possible to do this and to open the doors to hospitality to provide for our strangers. The second point is this, and that is that as much as we would like to be charitable and provide for other folks, what we are really looking at are systemic issues, okay? So overall, the best way to deal with this would be comprehensive immigration reform. And it would also be to align the treatment of asylum seekers in a way that's similar to the treatment of refugees, because refugees and asylum seekers legally are the same. The only difference is that refugees come to us through a vetting system of the United Nations. They've been thoroughly vetted. Number one. Number two, when they get here, they have 6 months free rent, 6 months stipend, and 6 months and a work permit immediately upon arrival. And we don't treat asylum seekers the same way. When legally speaking, they are both running from persecution. And so the folks that we are working with come here for the same reasons that our immigrant ancestors came here. They came to flee violence, they came for safety, they came for security, and they came to work. And they want to work, and we're not allowing them to work legally. And what then ends up happening is that they are exploited, just like our undocumented community who have been here for years are exploited, because our undocumented community pay into Social Security, they pay through ITN numbers, into taxes, and they can't benefit from what they're contributing to Social Security, but we benefit from their contributions. And so, and then we're putting up a situation where we see a division and conflict between our undocumented community and our new arrivals. And this is all due to systemic issues. And so if everybody would contact their congresspeople, contact their senators, and say, please give work permits to the asylum seekers entering the country, contact the president, then we can make a big difference and a significant difference in changing the system. And these folks want to work. They want to be able to maintain their families on their own. So we have to give them an opportunity to do that legally.
I think Leslie has the hand.
Yes, thank you, Reverend Jaime. The question I had, which I think is similar to one I saw in chat, and that is, gosh, with all these thousands of people descending on Chicago, how do you decide which families to have in your property? You know, what kind of criteria do you use? And I mean, must be heart-wrenching to say yes to some and no to others. So how do you work through that?
Right. So for us, as I shared briefly the experience, it's more looking for families who are willing to live with other families. And as I said, you know, the some of them self-select and tell me, no, that's not, I don't want to do that. I'd rather have rental assistance and stay in the apartment I'm in. You know, ideally, our process is that we will find a family that is currently in shelter and is single women with kids. That's the only criteria we have in demographics, just because of the experience that the community has of serving single women with kids in the daycare. So the way we imagine this in the beginning is like, we already do this, right? So if we are going to do it for recent arrivals, because of the culture, the similar cultures that we have in our community and the lack of language barriers, we can do it for recent arrivals as well. So that's why it makes a perfect sense that it would be a good fit. But we, you know, as much as I try to invite all the families who I have been in contact with in the interview process, as I said, they ended up self-selecting in the sense of they might not be interested in living with other families, and that's how it ended up being. So far, the family who has said they want to be there, they're there. So
Good.
I see
How
really-
many families do you have right now?
we have right now we only have one family. We
Okay.
have interviewed a total of 6 families in total. So
And you have room for 3, I think. Is that right, Jaime?
we have room for 3. Yes.
Yeah. Cynthia Doucette, I see a really interesting comment that you made in the chat. I wonder if you'd be willing to unmute and talk a little bit about what's going on with your church.
Oh, sure. Thank you so much. And thanks to all of you. This has been just a real inspiration. I'm with St. Matthew's Evanston, and we have a partnership with St. Andrew's Pentecost, also in Evanston, 2 little neighborhood churches. And St. Andrew's is a mission church, and they have a vicarage that's been unused for 3 or 4 years. So we're getting together to bring it up to code. It's got some, safety issues, and we're fundraising for that. We've also got interest across the deanery, really nice interest. So we hope to this summer, we've already got a quote from a contractor, hope this summer get enough money to update it and then have a family by when it gets cold, when the weather gets cold. So we've got experience co-sponsoring a refugee family with Refugee One. But we don't have all the background that you have about the asylum seekers. So we're trying to, on a parallel path, learn all about how best to identify the family or families that end up living there. Just all, how do you help with medical, how you help with school, all the things that are going to come up that we haven't had to do before. So I'm really looking, I really appreciate this forum. Just to learn from all of you.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you.
Jack, it looks like Fran's had her hand up for a while.
Oh, I'm sorry, I can't see that. Hi, Fran. Go ahead. You're muted, Fran.
No, sorry. This may have already been explained, and I might have missed it, but I'm not clear, like, do you know, or who is the coordinating group? And do they know when these buses are coming? And is there a place the buses all come to, like a central bus station? And do you know they're coming? And is there groups there to meet them? Or is it kind of haphazard? I just wondered about any kind of communication system and coordinating.
Yeah, good question. Go ahead, Sandra.
Unfortunately, the government units down south don't feel that it is necessary to communicate with our government units. And so they send the buses anytime, anywhere. We don't know how many people are coming. And so I know that in certain areas like St. Mark's Episcopal Church in Glen Ellen, is part of a rapid response team. And so they have a network there so they can communicate with the whole town whenever they have a group coming. And what they do is they provide transportation for the folks to go to the city, to Chicago. And then, so we're just, I mean, I'm not quite sure how the city is able to manage it, but they have what is called a launch pad. And that is in the downtown area. They get some, I guess that it would be the same thing if you were to go into an emergency room and you get a quick check over while you're waiting. And then ultimately they will place you for a specific amount of time in one of the shelters. So that's how it's working so far. The good thing is there are no people in police stations right now.
Yeah, that seems like a triumph.
We had some experience in Toledo about 3 years ago when the buses would come through Toledo, and that was an exchange point to new buses, and members of our church would meet them there with hot food and baby supplies and all of that and help them find the new buses, but that suddenly stopped but it was going for a while, and I'm just aware it could start up anytime, and we never knew when the buses were coming, except through some connections with churches on the way who said, oh, this bus is headed your way, so.
Yeah, there were appeals sent from the Chicago government, of course, to Texas, formally asking to, please communicate with us and notify us about what's going on. And as Sandra has pointed out, they just sort of refuse to do that and just send the people whenever they feel like it. I see another interesting comment from Robert, who is talking about St. Paul and the Redeemer has a migrant support program. Robert, can you possibly unmute and talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, first question, somebody asked where it is. We're in the Kenwood neighborhood on the south side of Chicago, Chicago. Last August, the vestry and the Faith in Action team approved a brand new migrant support program. It kind of grew out. We used to have a refugee support program, and this was focused more on the new migrants. And it grew out of several things. Obviously, at the time, people were preparing food for people living in police stations, but also our church took in very bad weather, 100 people illegally, sheltered them in the basement of our church. We have developed relationship with some of them as they moved out to housing. We also support. We have a studio apartment in Hyde Park, and we had 2 migrants, asylum seekers there last year. This year we have a mother with 2 small children, and she's getting support from she's getting rental support from the state, but also the church is giving her in-kind contributions, food, diapers, that kind of thing. We also are doing what we call serving specific relational needs. There was one asylum seeker who could not get a work permit. She was discouraged. She had a son in New York. One of our members paid for her airfare to go to New York. We also found somebody who had a beautiful apartment. He paid only 10% of the rent, but he lost his job. So we gave him I think about $600 to cover that. So these are basic emergency needs, Ventura passes maybe, that kind of thing. So we, that kind of thing, and because we have the relationship of people who have been with us, and moved on to shelters and such, we try to serve those needs. So it's a small fund served only by parish contributions. A local church down the street gave us $2,000, which helped a lot. So it's still there, but I think of it. We're dealing with local needs because we can't cover. It's so massive, we can't do that. So you have to be rather specific. We also gave some money. We have a food pantry, and a lot of our arepas are essential to Venezuelan. You can't get from Chicago Food Depository, doesn't have them. So we gave them a grant to buy that masa, the masa arepas to make those. So that kind of thing. So as I'm saying, it's specific needs as we can find out what they are. The other day, 2 former people who lived in the basement of our church were living in a very warm apartment. They wanted some fans, so we got some fans for them, that kind of thing. But that's just kind of it. I know that's in a nutshell, but it's kind of targeting needs of people we know, and we're still figuring out what we could do. Somebody suggested it'd be a good idea for some churches. Some migrants want to sell food on the street. A peddler's license costs $100. So it's the kind of thing we might be able to handle. So any questions? As I said, that's kind of in a rush, in a nutshell, but that's what it is. Okay. So
I think that's a great description. And you mentioned a number of things that are quite simple and small
Yep.
scale and make a difference. They make a contribution. So it doesn't have to be
well,
doesn't
we
have to
have
be a huge program.
thanks, Jack. We have one couple who were, again, part of the basement brigade. They moved off to an apartment, but they we bought some Ventra passes for them, and then it turns out they lost their roommates. So we gave them a little. We're trying to find roommates for them to pay half the rent, that kind of thing. So it's sort of a. I hope it's not hit and miss, but it's sort of trying to deal with specific needs that if you don't get in there, something worse could happen. They could lose their housing. Sandra, I see your hand. Go ahead.
That's a great segue. I tell churches that you may not be able to put up a family, you may not be able to put up 4 families, 3 families, but every church can do something.
Mhm.
Every church can do something. And I'll give you, and so I get phone calls and I'll meet with the churches, with the pastor, with the rectors, the vicars. And sometimes they don't have a priest. Sometimes it's lay leadership, okay? More often that's happening than before. And so, for example, I get a call from a woman who I had met at Transfiguration in Palos Park last summer. And that church had been helping 4 families from Venezuela. She was one of them. And it turned out that their benefits had been cut. And also they had a $1,600 electric bill. And so when I contacted the church, my colleague had retired. She put me in contact with a chair of the refugee committee. And that person explained to me that they had been assisting these 4 families. They had, I think they were contributing $800 every month for the 4 families, and they divided it equally among the families. And then I obtained some information about a contact person on state benefits, and I emailed that information to the chair of the refugee committee, and I said, go for it, see if you can figure out how to get those benefits back. Another church where it's a very small church, have not had a priest for over 2 years, and I supply there on occasion. Last time I was there, they said that they had been working with one of the mutual aid groups on the south side in the city, and that because of their relationship with the mutual aid group, they are now going to be renting one. They have an apartment in the church building, and they're going to be renting an apartment to one of the men whose family still is in Venezuela. He's got to bring the family over, and he's going to be working as their janitor. And this is a church that is really struggling to exist. And so if a church starts somewhere, anywhere, and you begin to work with folks, and you begin to understand the necessity, and you begin to understand what it is that you have that you can contribute, then generally over a period of time, the church will become more engaged. But we have to start somewhere, okay?
That might be a good note to end on, unless there are more questions. Carol, did you want to ask something? You're muted. You have to unmute, Carol.
Yes.
There you go.
Um, I've been, it's wonderful, but I feel that we haven't heard anything about the young men or even the men in terms of what kind of help any of them are getting. And I know that that you probably have more men than women even that are at lost. And is there anything going to help include some of them and help them begin to feel involved?
It is a good question, because it's easier for people to feel like I'd like to help a young family or a woman with children or something like that. But there are a lot of young men in the groups that are coming in. One of our churches in Oak Park, where I live, Grace Church, has housed about 20 Venezuelan single men for quite a period of time, and they've gotten funding from the town and from Cook County. So they're doing a great job in that area and a great service. As you know, I said, a population that's a little bit harder to find options for. So that's a good thing. But you really put your finger on an interesting question, Carol, because it's 20-year-old man by himself needs just about as much help as anybody in trying to get acclimated to a new location. Sandra, did you want to say something about that?
Yeah, the young men, they're much more, and they're apt to relocate depending upon where the job market is the best. But yeah, Grace Church was an excellent example. And the team from St. John's has done an excellent job with a very large family from Ecuador that includes 2 adult sons and 1 son-in-law, helping them with their asylum applications, helping them figure out how to get benefits, helping them to figure out how to get state coverage for medical bills. So it is kind of a catch-as-catch-can situation. And I know that with the Sanctuary Working Group, the network of churches and nonprofits, that I have to say that we do prioritize families for looking for housing, but we also prioritize individuals with disabilities, because simply there's not enough housing stock out there to do. So, we have to be able to, they're the most vulnerable of the population. I think that's the reason why there may be a little bit of a differential treatment. The young men are a little bit more independent, self-assertive, and not as vulnerable as families with children and women with children.
Any more questions anyone would like to bring up? It's been a great conversation. Thanks again to everybody for being here. Really been a wonderful conversation. I think we've all learned quite a bit from it. All right, if we're through, I will ask Father Jaime to please pray us out and say good night.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to start with sharing a passage from Acts of the Apostles. The first week we brought the family in, the first family that we have with us. I was feeling confused and overwhelmed. I have this big responsibility now, a family living in a rectory, and the reading that same Sunday of the first week was from the Acts of the Apostles, chapter 4, verses 33 and on. And I want to share that with you. You might know this by heart. It says, with great power, the apostles gave testimony to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus. And great grace was upon them all. There was not a needy person among them, for as many as owned lands or houses sold them and brought the proceeds of what was sold. They laid it at the apostles' feet, and it was distributed to each as any had need. God, we thank you because you have called us to this ministry. You've called us to be witnesses of your kingdom. Help us remember the apostles and how everything was shared in common. Help us live our gospel values as fully as we can. All this we ask through your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you, Jaime.